The galaxy had rules. Every species knew them. When machines broke beyond standard repair thresholds, you threw them away. When technology became outdated by even a single generation, you discarded it. The Consortium of Advanced Species had maintained this practice for over 50,000 years. Efficiency demanded it. Progress required it. No one questioned the wisdom of abandonment. Then humans arrived. Commander Vethka of the Reloran Dominion stood on the observation deck of his cruiser, watching the small blue planet through the viewport. Earth, they called it. A backwater world in an unremarkable solar system. His mission was simple enough. The Consortium had dumped their technological waste on this planet for 3 centuries. Mountains of broken starship engines, failed quantum processors, damaged atmospheric generators, and countless other machines deemed worthless by galactic standards now covered vast regions of the planet's surface. The humans had complained. They had sent primitive radio signals into space, asking why alien vessels kept dropping garbage on their world. The Consortium had ignored them, as they ignored all primitive species. But now something strange was happening on Earth. The Consortium sensors had detected energy signatures that should not exist on a pre-contact world. Vethka received his orders directly from the High Council. Investigate, report, determine if the humans posed any threat. He expected to find nothing. Perhaps the primitives had accidentally activated some piece of discarded equipment. It happened sometimes. Usually, the activation resulted in explosions, and the problem solved itself. What he found changed everything he understood about the universe. The human female who greeted his landing party wore clothing made from materials Vethka did not recognize. She smiled at him, showing teeth in what he had been told was a gesture of friendship among her species. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chun, and she was the director of something called the Reclamation Institute. She led him through a city that should not exist. Buildings rose around them, constructed from salvaged alien metals and reconfigured structural components. Power flowed through cables made from rewired Consortium conduits. Vehicles moved through the streets, their engines clearly derived from scrapped atmospheric shuttles, but modified in ways Vethka had never seen. The humans had not just activated the broken machines. They had taken them apart. They had studied every component. They had figured out how each piece worked, and then they had rebuilt them into something new. Dr. Chun explained as they walked. 300 years ago, when the first dump ships arrived, humanity had been on the edge of destroying itself. Wars, environmental collapse, resource depletion. They had looked up at the stars and seen only more powerful beings treating their world like a garbage pit. Some humans had wanted to surrender. Others had wanted to hide. But a small group had looked at the mountains of discarded technology and seen something else entirely. Opportunity. The first generation of what they called scavenger engineers had died young. Radiation poisoning from damaged power cores. Electrical burns from unstable circuits. Toxic exposure from leaking chemical batteries. They had no manuals, no guides, no teachers. Every piece of knowledge they gained came at a terrible cost. But they learned. Their children learned faster. The second generation developed safety protocols and testing methods. They created the first human-built fusion reactor from 17 different broken Consortium engines. It was ugly, inefficient by galactic standards, and it changed human history forever. Dr. Chun showed Vethka their main research facility. Scientists and engineers worked at stations filled with alien technology, taking apart machines that the Consortium had considered worthless, finding new uses for every component. A young man demonstrated a medical device constructed from a broken entertainment system. The original machine had projected holographic images for amusement. The humans had discovered that its imaging components could be reconfigured to scan organic tissue with incredible precision. They had built a diagnostic tool that could detect diseases at the cellular level. An elderly woman showed him agricultural equipment made from damaged mining drones. The drilling systems had been converted into soil enrichment devices. The navigation computers now managed vast networks of automated farms that could grow food in almost any environment. A child no older than 8 years presented a toy she had built herself. It was a small flying machine constructed from a broken communication relay. She had taught herself to program its movement patterns using techniques she had learned from watching the older engineers. Vefka felt something he had not experienced in his 200 years of service to the Dominion. He felt afraid. The consortium threw away their broken machines because repair was inefficient. Why spend resources fixing something when you could simply build a new one? Their manufacturing capabilities were so advanced that replacement always cost less than restoration. But the humans could not build new machines. They had no choice but to work with what they were given. And in doing so, they had developed something the consortium had lost long ago. They had developed creativity. Vefka returned to his ship and sent his report to the High Council. He described everything he had seen: the rebuilt cities, the hybrid technologies, the medical devices and agricultural systems, and countless other innovations. He described the children learning to engineer before they could properly read. He described a civilization rising from garbage. The High Council's response came within hours. They ordered immediate action, not destruction. The humans had proven themselves too valuable to destroy. The consortium offered Earth membership, full status, access to working technology, training programs, trade agreements. Everything the humans could want. Dr. Chun and the other leaders of the Reclamation Institute met to discuss the offer. Vefka was permitted to observe. The debate lasted 7 days. Some humans wanted to accept immediately. Proper technology would save lives. No more deaths from experimental failures. No more children growing up in the shadow of alien garbage dumps. They could become a normal galactic civilization. Others were suspicious. Why would the consortium suddenly value a species they had treated like vermin for 3 centuries? What did they really want? Dr. Chun spoke last. She talked about her grandmother, one of the original scavenger engineers. Her grandmother had lost 3 fingers and most of her eyesight working on a damaged antimatter containment unit. She had spent her final years teaching young engineers everything she had learned. Her grandmother's last words had been a warning. Never trust anyone who throws away their tools. The humans rejected the consortium's offer. Instead, they made a counter-proposal. They would accept trade relationships. They would share their innovations. They would even allow consortium observers to study their methods. But they would not join. They would not accept working technology. They would continue to build their civilization from broken machines and discarded components. The consortium was confused. Why would anyone choose the hard path when an easy one was offered? Dr. Chun tried to explain, but she knew they would never truly understand. The humans had learned something precious from their centuries of struggle. They had learned that the things you build yourself, from nothing, from garbage, from failure after failure, those things become part of you in ways that gifts never can. Years passed, decades, centuries. The humans kept building. They developed new techniques for reconstructing damaged technology. They created entirely new sciences based on understanding how things broke and how they could be remade. They taught other primitive species who had been used as dumping grounds by the consortium. A new alliance formed. They called themselves the Forged. Every member species had built their civilizations from abandoned scraps and broken machines. Every one of them had been deemed worthless by the greater galactic community. The consortium watched with growing concern. The Forged were not expanding through conquest or colonization. They were not building massive fleets or developing superweapons. They were doing something far more dangerous. They were innovating. A Forged engineer solved the problem of faster-than-light communication that the consortium had considered impossible. She did it by combining components from 3 different broken systems that were never meant to work together. A forge scientist discovered a new form of energy generation by studying why certain power cores failed. Understanding failure led to understanding success in ways the consortium had never considered. A forged child built a spacecraft in his backyard using parts from a crashed survey drone. The ship was ugly and slow by galactic standards. It was also the first vessel ever constructed entirely by a single person. The galaxy began to change. Other species started questioning the old ways. Why did they throw away so much? What else had they abandoned that might have value? Some began to study their own discards. Some began to trade with the forged. The consortium called an emergency session. The humans and their allies were disrupting 50,000 years of stable civilization. Something had to be done. They debated for months. Military action was considered and rejected. The forged had proven remarkably good at defending themselves with improvised weapons and rebuilt defense systems. Economic sanctions were meaningless against people who built everything from garbage. Finally, a young Reloran diplomat proposed a radical solution. If the consortium could not defeat the forged, perhaps they should learn from them. Commander Vethka, now an elderly advisor to the council, supported the proposal. He had never forgotten what he had seen on Earth all those centuries ago. He had never stopped wondering what his own people might have accomplished if they had not thrown so much away. The consortium established its first reclamation academy. Engineers were taught to repair instead of replace. Scientists were encouraged to study failures instead of just successes. Children were given broken machines and challenged to make them work. The results were slow at first. Thousands of years of habit could not be overcome quickly. But change began. Dr. Chun did not live to see the full transformation. Humans, for all their creativity, still had short lifespans compared to most galactic species. But her great-great-granddaughter stood at the ceremony where the consortium officially renamed itself. They chose to call themselves the Restored. The galaxy had new rules now. Nothing was worthless. Nothing was beyond repair. Every broken machine held potential. Every failure contained lessons. And at the center of it all, on a small blue planet covered with the ancient garbage dumps that had birthed the revolution, the humans continued to build. They took what others threw away. They found value in what others deemed worthless. They forged civilization from scrap and innovation from desperation. They had been given trash. They had made it into treasure. And they had taught the galaxy that the measure of a species was not what they could create from nothing, but what they could create from something everyone else had given up on. The broken machines still arrived sometimes. Old habits died hard, and the universe still generated plenty of damaged technology. But now, when those machines fell to Earth, children raced to claim them. Schools competed for the most interesting salvage. Engineers celebrated each new challenge. What was once a curse had become a blessing. What was once garbage had become the foundation of a new galactic order. And what was once a primitive species dismissed and disrespected by ancient civilizations had become the teachers of the stars. The humans had not forgotten their origins. Every year, on the anniversary of the first dump ship's arrival, they gathered at the site of the original garbage mountains. Most of those mountains were gone now, their contents long ago transformed into the tools of a thriving civilization. But one mountain remained. They preserved it as a monument, a reminder of what they had been given and what they had made of it. On its peak stood a simple statue, a human figure, ragged and burned, holding a broken machine in scarred hands. The figure looked up at the stars with an expression that could only be called defiance. The inscription below reads simply, "From your garbage, we forged our future." And across the galaxy, countless species read those words and understood. The humans had taken the worst the universe could give them and turned it into the best of themselves. That was the true measure of humanity. That was why they would never be forgotten.